So in today's lesson, we're going to talk about some Burnin George Benson blues concepts. These lines will not only help you sound more bluesy, but will increase your speed and fluency on the guitar. Let's get into it. So first off, I just want to say that all the things that we're going to be covering today are based off my previous George Benson picking video. So if you haven't seen that, make sure to check it out before you continue on with this video if you want a clear understanding of what's going on. Also, all the lines that are covered today are from George's solo off I Don't Know from his great record, The New Boss Guitar of George Benson. The first couple blues lines are based around what I like to call speed burst blues lines. Here's the first one. So George uses the blues with chromaticism to get this sound. He starts with going from the flat third of G7 to the major third of G7, which is part of the blues sound, going from the flat third to the major third. So then he uses chromaticism to link parts of the G7 arpeggio together, in this case the third going to the fifth. This speed burst blues line can be easily moved in different octaves and over different chords of the blues as well. You can also play this line in two different octaves and link them together pretty easily to make this nice blues run. So our next speed burst blues line adds to this one and uses a sweep picking motion. Check it out. So this can be broken down into a couple different concepts. The first is this sweep picking shape that really lays nicely on the guitar and leads into our first line. Then he links this sweep picking shape back to our first line, which again links the third going to the fifth using the blues. As we move through the lesson, you'll see how important this line is to George's playing. And then George uses the C minor pentatonic scale over our C7 chord, since that's the chord we're playing over, which is a pretty common sound in the blues. And then he closes with our first lick after walking down the C minor pentatonic scale. So our next speed burst blues line adds a couple more new elements to the mix. Check it out. So this line starts out with a bluesy double stop, which is pretty much just when we play two notes at once. In this case, we're playing the root of the chord and the fifth of the chord, being G7, but we slide into the fifth a half step below. And then George walks down what I like to call a blues box, which is just our blues scale, but packaged into a nice one octave shape that lays really nice on the guitar. After that, George uses the sound of the flat third going to the major third again. And then George links this to an E minor 7 arpeggio. This works because the E minor 7 arpeggio shares the same notes as a G6 chord. The 6 is important because it's the 13 in a dominant chord. So again, George finishes this line using our first lick that we discussed. So if we combined all of these George Benson speed burst ideas together, we could maybe get a line that sounds kind of like this. Very briefly, I wanted to touch on a small announcement. The person that makes my backing tracks that I use, Phil Wilkinson, has recently been in an accident and has not been able to use one of his hands. So if you could show your support right now and go over to his website and purchase one of his backing tracks, that would really help and show that this community cares about each other. All right, so the next Burnin blues concept that George shows us in his solo sounds like this. So this line further expands the use of double stops like we talked about earlier, but shows us some different ways to use them. So the first is that George uses this double stop shape, but plays the top note off of all the notes of a G6 arpeggio. This is a great way to add some bluesy double stop sounds to your blues lines and can be linked fairly easily to any of our blues boxes. So then after that, George plays the same double stop shape, but this time making sure all the top notes are off of a C sharp diminished chord, which is our passing diminished chord going from the 4 to the 1 in the blues. This is cool because it's a great way to build some tension, but also add bluesiness to that tension. If we did this over the 5-7 chord going back to the 1 at the end of the blues form, we could get something that sounds like this. So here's another line where George shows us another way to use double stops. So what George is doing here is just playing double stops through the Mixolydian mode over our G7 chord. And then he has some notes below the double stop that provide a foundation and an anchor to jump from when going to each double stop. And then what makes the line even better is that he uses chromaticism in between these shapes to link some of them together. In this case, we go, there's a chromatic passing, and then the last one, we have another one in between those two shapes. So if we combine all of George's double stop ideas together, we could get a line that sounds kind of like this. So when you listen to George's solo, all of these techniques that we've covered in this lesson are used to enhance just his straight up fundamental blues playing. If you want more information covering this core blues concepts and how to play them, make sure to check out the video linked in the corner of this screen. So I'm going to close this lesson by trying to apply all the concepts that George has showed us in this lesson over one chorus of a G blues. If you'd like the guitar profile and the PDF for not only this etude, but every example that we played in this lesson, make sure to subscribe to my Patreon, which you can find linked in the video description below. Alright, I want to thank everyone for watching this video about George Benson's Burnin blues concepts. If you would like more of these kind of George Benson picking videos and just George Benson in general, make sure to leave me a comment below. Also, again, a huge shout out to my Patreons. You guys are amazing and you keep this channel going. I really appreciate you. Alright, and as always, thanks for watching, and remember to always keep swinging.